Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the Wednesday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah, and today we are thrilled, excited, beside ourselves to welcome Billy Tucci to the program. You know Billy as the creative driving force behind She, S-H-I, the character that busted onto the scene in the early 90s and has been around ever since and shows no signs of stopping. In fact, there is a new She series coming out from Billy. It's called She Gatecrasher. It should be on the scene on Kickstarter very soon. But Billy, of course, has been all over the industry as well, doing some war comics, doing some other work for the bigger publishers. But She is his baby, and we get into his origins as a creator, her origins as a character, and let's get to it. This is Billy Tucci. And we are very excited to have Billy Tucci on the program. Billy, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, my friend. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you. And so we're going to kick you off with our patented first question, which you probably have never been asked before, but how did you first discover comic books?
Well, gee whiz. I guess I'd have to say I was in the flea market. No, well, actually, I learned more about comics from you remember seeing Archie and stuff like that when you were a little kid. Really didn't care about that, but I think it had to be those Mego toys.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't familiar really with the characters, but I loved Green Arrow because I love Robin Hood. And he was probably my favorite at the time. But those Mego action figures, I Captain America, of course. I think that was my gateway. And then I remember going to I was a monster kid. So I remember going to the flea market with my friend and his father and picking up, I still have the book. I still have it. It's is that all right for me to jump up and run and go get it real quick?
Sure.
All right, hang on.
We're loose here. Yeah, why not?
Among other things,
Oh,
but
nice.
yeah, so
Yeah.
pick that up partly because well, I was being a monster kid and a war kid. I love war movies and stuff and
Sure.
Universal Monsters was because of Werewolf by Night.
Mm,
So he became my favorite. And I also love Paul McCartney and it's basically a takeoff of the Band on the Run cover.
right.
So I think I might even actually homage this cover for my new Gatecrasher comic, She Gatecrasher. So yeah, so that's that. I have that was it. And then I remember in seventh grade, a friend of mine, Barry Orkin, who still does a lot of work for us. He designs our logos, he illustrated Demon Gun with Gary Cohn. He actually painted the first two issues of She, hand painted them. He's also, him and my friend Stephen Peros have a comic, Stoker and Wells, that's out. And Barry turned me on to like a lot of the Marvel books. And again, I just love the war books. I love, I loved Walt Simonson. I remember seeing Rocketeer for
Hmm.
the first time. Somebody had that. Then Joe Kubert, those were my guys really. It was Joe Kubert, John Romita, and Walter Simonson really. I had not yet discovered the Rocketeer. And but the better I started getting at art through junior high school, then the more I moved away from comics. Because
Hmm.
I'm looking at Walter Simonson's work. I'm like, I could never do this. I could never do this. So that's when I basically moved away. I wanted to be an illustrator, but I'm like, I can't do this. I just cannot do this. And then it was in college, I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology. I was an illustration major, and it was 1988, and one of my classmates brought in the Amazing Spider-Man number 300, the Todd McFarlane cover.
Yeah.
And that
Very
just
familiar.
Yep, that just blew me away. Like, wow, what is this? And we were all looking at it, and I remember how non-conformist he was. Like, he didn't really care about um perspective really or anatomy. He was having fun with it, and I love the energy that it had about the book. Most of his backgrounds were just like photographs, like photostated behind it and stuff. And I'm like, well, this is kind of fun. This looks a little easier, but he had that also that energy that was lacking from a lot of the earlier stuff of the greats, if you will. And then I just got really into it. My teacher at FIT, Karen Santry, one of my professors, she brought and she said you should do comic books and brought me in the Pander Brothers Grendel, the Christina Spar series. And that just really got that. She's like, this art reminds me of yours. And it really just took off from there. That's when I got into Frank Miller's Daredevil. I discovered The Rocketeer. I discovered Mark Schultz's Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, blew me away. And it's I never really looked back. And by the time I graduated college in 1990, I firmly wanted my career path was I wanted to become a comic book artist somehow and writer. And it took 4 years, almost 4 years later. She number one came. She Way the Warrior number one came out. So it's a pretty interesting. A lot of hard work. Try to get work like everyone else did from Marvel and DC. Of course, I had
Mhm.
a regular job. I was designing children's wear for Macy's, believe it or not. And I uh, I remember going to San Diego Comic-Con in 1993. Am I getting ahead of art myself here? Am I just telling my whole
No, go ahead. I mean, I'll
story?
stop you, but you're basically going on the trajectory of my questions were going to be
Oh, okay,
anyway.
good.
So,
Yes.
yeah, keep going. Let's see where we end up.
All right. So I remember going to, I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 1993 trying to get work, and nobody would hire me. I got eventually, like a month or so later, I got a call from Malibu Comics that wanted me to do a Protectors cover for them, which actually was in previews, and it might even be in like the January previews for March release. But the book never came out. They never used my cover. They used someone else's. Um, but I got rejected by everyone. There was someone at DC that was interested in mine, but if I could draw like Jim Lee, he had something for me. And he wanted me to try to ape Jim Lee's style. Now, A, I can't draw like Jim Lee. Like who can? And B, I don't want to draw like Jim Lee, So then I was pretty much, being rejected by everybody. I did make my way to small press and I met this amazing young man with two of his friends in small press at this little 6 foot table. And he had a lot of energy about him. And he was talking to me and actually treated me like a peer and offered me a pinup in a comic that was coming out next year of his. And I'm like, sure, that sounds great. And that person ended up being Brian Polito, and it was for the Lady Death swimsuit issue. But here was this guy that was publishing his own comics. He had Evil Ernie, which was published by Malibu, and I think he might have had Chaos Comics books of Evil Ernie. But he was talking about that he's going to do his own stuff. Why work for someone else? And he really inspired me, and that pushed me when I got home. It was August of '93. I was going to do my own comic. I didn't know anything about how a comic book was made. So I went to other publishers, small publishers, to see if they would produce my book. Everyone turned me down. Even my buddy Adam Post from Triumphant Comics, I showed it to him. He had this amazing office. And even he said, yeah, Billy, this is really cool, but girl books don't sell. So I'm like, you know what? The heck with this. I'm going to do it myself. And I was working on the uh, at San Diego. My sample pages were the She Razor pages because I had met Everett Hartsoe at a show in New York a few months earlier, and I was doing a 12-page story in what would become the Razor Annual, which introduced my character She, and so I finished those 12 pages, and then maybe around September or so or October. I said, you know what? I'm going to publish this myself. And I approached all the distributors, typed up this letter that I was this big new exciting company with our new comic Way the Warrior number one, and we got accepted and by Diamond, and the book was in the January previews and came out of March that year. So from August '93 is when I decided I was going to make my own comic to October of '93 that I was now going to publish my own comic to March of '94 is when She number one came out. And dude, it exploded. It was crazy. It was just crazy. So,
I
huzzah.
mean, what a story. There you
Yeah.
go. What a great
There was a
story. I
lot
mean,
going on in between that, if I may. I had met these business partners,
sure.
and They had this office on Madison Avenue, 34th Street. I was in New York City. I was at the Kinko's there making photocopies. I think for a New York con, actually, it was like September or something to bring my samples in to show them my work. To show this because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make this comic, so I might as well keep trying to get Marvel work, DC work, and met this one guy. They wanted to partner with me. They had this office on a penthouse on Madison Avenue and 34th Street. Um, and I basically was started to develop the book there. I met Peter Gutierrez, who became my co-writer on She, and eventually the writer of She. And I was basically like a glorified secretary working on my comic pages, answering their phones. Needless to say, when it came time to pay the bill for Diamond, the $4,000 I owed for the advertising, and I think Diamond's was 2,300, but then my inker at the time wanted to get paid for the pages, which I don't blame him, but he did agree to do the book, without getting paid at first, at least the first 10, 12 pages. Now he's holding these pages hostage. So I end up going to friends and family, and was able to raise like 4 or 5 grand, paid my Diamond, left those guys. They had threatened to sue me. My aunt, who Debbie wasn't my wife then, she was just my girlfriend, when I was like 25, 26, is when the lawyers got involved and we just signed a deal. And of course, I was able to keep my character. And like I said, as they say, the rest is history. But it was a crazy run. I know I'm rambling, but it was a crazy run because I remember Diamond was saying, if listen, and it was Mark Herr, my rep, and no one knew what She was going to be like. So no one knew. It was just another small independent book. And Mark's like, you know what? Let's just cancel all these orders and you can offer it 6 months from now. And I'm like, no, this book has got to go. This book has got to go. And how I was able to get that book published without any money after these partners said they were going to finance it, as I wrote it, drew it, Barry painted it. I learned how to do word balloons and all that stuff, and the lettering was all on my friend's Apple II computer with the whiz bang font. And I was at a Comic Color, it was called. It was a publisher, it was a printer out on Long Island who my mother knew the owner through work somehow, or someone, a friend of theirs or something. And I was there showing them my pages about how do I get this stuff made into a comic. Again, I had no money, and there's a super nice man there, and he's looking over, and he seems, he's like, let me take a look at those. And he's like, what are these? And I'm like, well, these are my pages. These are my color pages for my comic that I want to put out, that I can't afford to put out, but I got 37,000 orders from Diamond. And he's like, you got 37,000 per. I'm like, yes. So what he did was, I guess my enthusiasm was so contagious that he convinced, I convinced him that this book was going to be something special. He vouched for me for Comic Color to do my color separations, and went one step further and vouched for me for their printer. And anyway, this man was Fred Pierce, who at the time was like the vice president of Valiant Comics. He just happened to be there. And he vouched for me personally with their printer, which was Spartan Printing in Sparta, Illinois, and put me in touch with Roberta, who was their rep. I was on the phone with Roberta. She goes, okay, so you have 37,000 copies for this book. We're going to print it for you. We never do this. Normally, we have to get paid up front, but Fred vouched for you that he will personally pay this bill if you don't pay this bill. And so we're going to print you 40,000 copies for free. And I was like, not for free, but right. That I have 30 days to pay them. Yeah. And I'm like, no, we have to do 50,000. My grandma, I think I'm 26 years old at the time. And she's like, excuse me? And I'm like, this book's going to be special. This book is going to be big. I'm telling you, I know I can sell 50,000 copies of it instead of just having 3,000 extra. I need 13,000 extra. And she's like, I don't know, for some reason, I believe you. So we'll print 50,000 copies. So I got them the book. I remember, I think it was on St. Patrick's Day. It was like a snowstorm. I borrowed my brother's car or something. My brother took me to the FedEx office. It had closed. So at 7, and I that was the last day for me to get the book, all the big files, big giant, big 4-color separation files. Like they had to be 4 feet by 5 feet back then. Plates, it was like 8-page plates. That's how complicated things were back then. Um, so I ended up taking the Long Island Railroad into Manhattan, and then rushing to the carrying this big box, um, like I don't know, 6, 7 blocks to the FedEx office in Manhattan because it closed at 9. And I just made it on time. Got everything FedEx overnight to them. The book hit the stores, I think, on or shipped on the 23rd of March. And then it just, like I said, it exploded, dude. It just once it got there, it 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 just took off. And I remember though, it didn't take off immediately because a week after the book hit the stands, I got a box from Diamond of returns because the book was returnable because I had said that it was going to have a glow in the dark cover. Because
Okay.
Mark Herr, my rep, is like, Billy, well, this is a new book. You've got to have some kind of gimmick. Everyone has gimmicks. They have die cuts. They have this. I'm like,
Right.
how about glow in the dark? Because I love that Mark's Texera Ghost Rider issue.
Yep.
And Sparta ended up telling me they don't do glow in the dark. I think she told me it was toxic. So they weren't going to do it. So I had to make the book returnable. So I did get a box of books returned from Diamond the first week. But I got to tell you, dude, by 3 weeks later, we had reorders for over 140,000 copies of that book.
Wow.
And I'm like, I only have 50,000, and I shipped them. I saved maybe 1,000 for myself or
Sure.
2,000 or so. Um, but yeah, so that's that. And to think of it, to ship those books out because of the demand. And then a retailer called me and he's like, I need more books. I need some books. I'll buy them from you. I'm like, they're all gone. And he's like, well, why don't you just print more? No one's gonna know. I'm like, no one's gonna know. I haven't even paid for the 50,000 I had printed.
Right.
Thank God I didn't listen to him, some nefarious, print retailer in Brooklyn. But then it just kept going. It just kept going and going. And what I did though is that I was so sure in my naivete and youth that this book was going to be something special that I did not solicit She-Way the Warrior #2 until June of 94. So She-Way the Warrior #1 was March 1994 in store. I solicited She-Way the Warrior #2 in June of 1994 because I wanted that book in people's hands, #1, when it came time to order #2.
Yep.
Because they all tell you that just automatically your numbers for #2 are going to drop it by half. Um, but this one, because #1 was on the stands, blew out. Our orders for #2 went to like 80,000 copies for #2. And
Yep.
then it just kept going up and up and up and up. And it was crazy. It was crazy. Good
I
times,
mean,
man.
what a story. I mean, starting out with your Treasury edition from Marvel and
Yep.
then coming back FIT and deciding you wanted to get in and then,
Yeah.
your first effort out of the gate, basically. I mean, other than, the short introduction and
Yeah, it was like, and they say
Razor.
over. Yeah, I remember someone said it was like, an overnight, success or something like that. I'm like, it's like 4 years in the private working on this concept for 4 years, man, starving, and I was
Yeah.
6 months behind on my rent. My landlord, because of how enthusiastic I was about it, believed me as well. So he said, "It's all good,"
He was floating
like,
you.
yeah. He's like, I know. He's like, I believe you, Billy. So a lot of people said that. They said, I believe you. It was pretty great.
Well, that has to be, really
Being-
validating and you of course delivered. And so
Yeah. And now
they
here
have
we
good
are.
reason.
What? Yeah, I don't know how many 100 issues of She or more later, 30 years,
Yeah. Let,
it's back again, doing great on, through crowdfunding and Kickstarters, Indiegogo. We're back in comic shops now. Starting the book is at the printer now, so I guess it'll be in stores Wednesday, not this Wednesday, next Wednesday, I think, or it'll be in stores before it's shipping this week. So it'll be in stores next week or the week after. That's the She Return of the Warrior #1. And we're just gonna keep going. Keep going. We took January off for soliciting because it's I'm just figuring credit cards, Christmas sales.
yeah,
Let's take
exactly.
January off and give ourselves a breather. But we are in comic shops with Diamond Comic Distributors now every single month. with new She product.
That's awesome.
It's fun, dude. It's cool, man. So
So let's talk about the actual character and the story itself. So this 4 years in the wilderness before you're soliciting and getting printing and all that stuff. So I'm sure you've been asked this so many times before, but the sort of the germination, the generation of a she as a character in the story, like where did that come from? What was your, association with or just interest in Japanese culture, and how did that kind of, that whole stew pot sort of, end up in the book that finally came out?
yeah, well, I got into it in college. Once I started getting into comics again, I just started creating these characters. And one that stood out eventually is the one that became She, as it started off as a male character. And I love the idea of ninja and samurai, the wars they would have and the rivalry they would have and stuff. So I created that. So the character was actually this male character who was a product of both sex, I guess, if you will, martial
Hmm.
sex of Japan. Then that movie, a movie came out with, I don't know, I think it came out. I don't know when the hidden. I think what's not the hidden. What's it called? The Hunted with Christopher Lambert. Um,
I didn't see it, but I remember it.
yeah, the I just want to see what year it came out. I think it came out. I think it Christopher 90. Okay, 95. Yeah, and that was kind of a similar type of thing. That this it was the ninjas versus the samurai. So I'm
Yeah.
glad I abandoned that idea. So again, going back to my buddy Barry Orkin, who got me back into comics in junior high school. Um, he was telling me about the Sohai warriors, which were the warrior monks of medieval Japan,
Mhm.
and I was just fascinated by them. And that's when I started to come up with. The more I researched into the warrior monks of medieval Japan, the more I learned that many of them weren't monks at all. They were just samurai ordained as priests to build the ranks of the temples. And they had children and things like that. So I'm like, wow, this is cool to make a product of these two sects, the Kyoto sect and the Nara sect, the Naran sect from Nara. Um, and the story just started to build from there. And then I'm the more research I'm doing, the more I'm discovering, like, this character would be a better this character would be better off if it was a female character. And again, this is a time girl books don't sell. You had
Mhm.
Wonder Woman had her own title, and Catwoman did. Jim Ballin's Catwoman. I think that came out later. I think Wonder Woman was the only She-Hulk. There wasn't a lot of
Yeah,
male,
right.
character, with their own books at the time. But it didn't matter because the story just started to take off. And then to have her to be, then I wanted to introduce the Christianity aspects of it. And that's how the character became biracial, because that adds a whole nother level to it. But I also wanted to add some color to it. So I wanted to give her green eyes. So, like, how can I have her green eyes? Oh, okay, she's biracial, you know. Um,
Sure.
until I learned that green eyes are very prevalent in Japan,
Okay.
um, via the Silk Road, when all of the explorers would come, and that's actually a major part in our new story, which launches in February. Our next graphic novel after this one that launches next month. It's when Anna goes back to Japan, and we're working on two titles. Either it's She, the Ghost with Green Eyes, or She, Big in Japan. So, I'm not sure, but that's pretty much what it was. And I got to tell you, like I said, the more research I did in Japanese mythology, Japanese history, the character really just started to take on an entire persona of herself for Anna Ishikawa.
And when you were, putting this together, and obviously you were scrambling, hustling to get just, the first issue out, um, how far did you, I guess, make yourself plan ahead? Were you sort of just like, I need to just put all my energy into this book, and then if it's a success, we're gonna, see where it goes? Or did you have something planned out as to where the story was gonna go, come hell or high water,
Well,
after that first issue?
yeah, well, there was no plan B that I was going to have a first issue. There was no plan B. But I had developed an entire story. A meeting with Peter Gutierrez, like my writer, that Peter and I started to develop this entire universe. And we even in our in Heroes World, which is one of the three main distributors back in the day, You had Diamond, Capital City, and Heroes World. They allowed us to have like a 3-page, 4-page interview in Heroes World. And then we were just talking about all these new books, all these books we have planned out and stuff like that. But no, we had the story of introducing Tomoe, the Narins, the whole Way of the Warrior story I had in my head, which I assumed to be like 12 issues. That entire storyline I had set when I wrote the first issue. So I already had the entire series broken down. Whether I was ever able to afford to do them, I don't know. But hell, I wasn't able to afford to do the first issue. But, I did it. We did it because it wasn't
Yeah.
just me. It was friends, it was family, it was people that believed in me. And I guess it kind of pays to maybe be a good person, I guess, or I don't know. I'm very blessed. I'm very fortunate, and I've never forgotten of just how fortunate I am. So,
And and so, this character now has been around for, I guess would it be the 30th anniversary if it was
yeah,
1994, right?
yep. 30th
Wow.
anniversary. Yep.
That's pretty amazing. And so that's, in the world of comics and character, development and all that stuff, that's a long time.
Yeah.
To what do you attribute the longevity of the character and the appeal of the character over that amount of time?
Don't know. But well, we never try to bastardize the culture. Peter and I, and then with Stephen Peros, Gary Cohn, other writers that I've worked with, because it's so much work to write,
Yeah.
write a script and then draw the book, then be the publisher. Like even today, it's just Debbie and I, my wife and I, running the company. We have an office, we have a few part-timers that help us out with fulfillment and all, but it's basically just the two of us doing everything. I write all the solicitations, all the press releases, plot it, all that stuff. And it's good to work with writers who have a different perspective of the character. So again, like Peter Gutierrez saw it from one way, and I saw it through another. Same thing with Stephen Peros, who wrote the Return of the Warrior trilogy. Gary Cohn, who wrote Senryaku, which we were nominated for a bunch of awards for. JC Vaughn, who's writing Gatecrasher with me right now. And he's scripting it, we plot it, and he writes it. It's just one less thing for me to do. But I think to bring in these accomplished writers who too have a respect for the culture, who have a respect for the character. We've never delved into misogyny with the character at all. We never were just, no gratuitous violence or sex or anything like that. Stayed away from, because we just wanted to tell a story. And I
Yeah.
think that's what helped why we had such a huge female following, from the get-go. We really did. A lot of the fan letters we got were from girls, from women. It was cool. It was really cool. And I'm very encouraged, because now it seems like the times are catching up to us with that. I mean, it's very hip right now, with for Asian stuff, like, look at Blue Eyed Samurai, which I love, but I hate at the same time, because I'm so upset because it's too similar. It's so similar to mine.
Yeah.
But what it is, we're talking to a film producers right now, so we'll see, knock on wood. If something happens with it. I personally love the idea of a Netflix series. I love animation. I'd love to have it like a Ninja Scroll type of look to it or something like
Oh,
that. And
yeah, that'd be cool.
yeah, right. So, and we'll see
Yeah.
what happens with it. But right, that's kind of out of my that's out of my wheelhouse.
Right.
With us, we're just focusing on, like I said, with JC Vaughn, with the new book Gatecrasher, which launches next month on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's Anna. It's going to be a fun book. It's a story that Anna gets trapped in comic book time, and she actually allies herself with my first interpretation of which was Ran, this character, which was very um late 90s Marvel,
Uh-huh.
type of character. And I changed her because I'm like, it's just not working. But she Rand guides her, as the two of them had to battle their way through all the comic book trends and genres and decades so Anna can get home. And she goes through another gate, through another door. And so we're going to have cowboys, westerns, horror, war, Nazis, robots, dinosaurs, bad girls, zombies, all this. My puppy. Hello. Hello. Yes, I know. She's gonna
Very cute.
be telling on. She comes up to tell on the cat because the cat's in the kitchen, I'm sure. So anyway, and this is a totally fun book, but there's a ton of public domain characters in it.
Yeah.
And also Brian Polito gifted me the allowance of using Lady Death in it. So
Nice.
Lady Death plays a pivotal role in the story, just because I feel that I owe Brian so much and he didn't even know how much he encouraged me and inspired me. He encouraged me, but he inspired me to do my own book. And I like to refer to myself as the kid brother he never wanted. So which which
I'm glad.
I'm also that to Mark Sparaccio, my buddy Mark Sparaccio.
I'm sure they want you. Don't sell yourself short. So you actually bring up something that I wanted to talk about, which is she teaming up with other characters, which she's done a lot of
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah.
What are those team ups like for you? You've been involved in most of them. It's not like you're just saying, here, take she and do what you want. You've been definitely involved. So what is it? What are those like? Are they all, one by one kind of different? Who controls the narrative? How does it work, especially with the intercompany kind of
Yeah. Well,
crossovers?
yeah, most of them, like I said, like it started off, our first crossover was she and with in Funny Time Features. And that was my friend Nancy from college's husband. I just met him, and he's like, you should put, I don't even know how it started. He's like, I got this idea. I'm like, sure, you can use she. And I remember his number one book was 500 copies. And then number two went to like 7,000 copies because she was in it. And that's a friend thing. Then, doing stuff like I got to meet Mark Silvestri. And I love Mark Silvestri. I love all those Image guys. Again, they inspired me too. And that was our first major crossover. Was she, was she Cyblade, which exploded. I think it's like the top 3 book of 95. Massive. And that was called it was called Battle for Independence. And it featured all these creator-owned characters. And it was great. I mean, we had, Paul Pope's THB in it, and we had, my God, Terry Moore Kachu was in it from Terry Moore. Jeff Smith's Bone was in it. Phone Bone was in it. It just goes on. We had Cerebus was in it, Dave Sims Cerebus, just you name it. The Madman was in it. Paul Pope allowed me, not Paul, Mike Allred
All
allowed
right.
it.
Yeah.
Madman, because I did a trading card for him. I'm like,
Right.
can I put Madman? He's like, yeah, sure. And that was a lot of fun. And we got a lot of we were able to raise awareness for a lot of ways. Yeah, I guess so. To put on the map a lot of smaller characters as well. David Max Kabuki was in it. Golly, just to think of so many cats. The Tick, Ben Edlund, let me use the Tick.
Yeah.
That's all in this book. And believe it or not, 95 is the 30th anniversary. So we're gonna do a cool one shot on that too.
Awesome.
Maybe like an artist edition of it or something like that with the issue and then all the black and white art. Because I own almost all the black and white art. I just gotta find it. I'm missing like 1 or 2 pages. Someone was a huge fan of Bone, and Jeff Smith doesn't sell his art.
Hmm.
So I kind of gave it to him for a song and a dance. I think he gave me like $200. I'm like, yeah, you're a huge you're a huge Bone fan. Here, have this page.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we're going to do to do a nice artist edition of that, like a Kickstarter Indiegogo quick campaign. But that was a lot of fun. And then like Daredevil, we did Daredevil, that's us in bars hanging out, just hanging out with the Marvel guys. And
Yeah.
it was Dan Buckley. It's like, we should do a crossover. Who'd you like to do a crossover? I'm like, dude, I love Daredevil. He's like, sure. Like just fun things like that. And it's that. And then, we did Wolverine which kicked off the battle
Mm-hmm.
books. And then a lot of the others are really smaller comic book publishers, a lot smaller than me. And if they ask me, I'm like, you know what? No one, I got people gave me a break. Fred Pierce was able to get my book printed for nothing. Brian Polito encouraged me. Why can't I let me help someone else out too? If you want to, sure, get use she. And I think Jeff Vaughn told me that she is one of the most used characters in crossovers. So if we can have it in a small book, why not? You know, let's have fun with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, she seems, why not? Exactly. Like
Mhm.
throw her in here. You can borrow characters there, and it seems like just I don't want to say she's a malleable character, but she's adaptable, to be able to be in all these different genres and, cross over with all these different characters. Um, but that actually leads me to another question, which is about you have not moved on from but you've sort of done some work for the big two on pre-existing characters, like things like Heroes for Hire, Jonah Hex, Harley Quinn,
Yeah.
etc. How did those come about, and what's different about, obviously you're not playing with your own invention.
Oh yeah, and they
But what
let you
kind
know
of
that. Yeah.
Yeah, they let you know that. I mean, what was it like working on something that's pre-existing that you have maybe some more constraints on how you can use them?
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, it gets it's Darwin Cook told me. Remember, Jack Kirby had said once that comics will break your heart. And it's true. It's more like Marvel and DC will break your heart because I've heard some of the greatest comic stories that will never be made from my fellow cartoonists, writers, artists that pitch these phenomenal stories. And they, for one reason or another, one corporate reason or another, and then normally they usually like personalities, like somebody at the company doesn't like somebody that they would rather them not be successful. A lot of pettiness is in corporate comics.
Mhm.
Um, but I had a lot of fun because I was doing She for 10 years or so, and you just get burnt out
Yeah.
doing the same thing. And then just hanging out. Dan Buckley, it was my first one was from Marvel and DC and Marvel when they were doing the Civil War. And
Hmm.
Dan Buckley asked Jimmy, he goes, how about Billy to do this, to do a comic, to do Heroes for Hire? So Jimmy called me. I'm like, sure. So that was fun. And then that led to the DC work. I did a lot of work for DC. Love that. Fortunate got nominated for an Eisner for one of the books. Got a lot of great reviews. Very fulfilling. Won awards for Sergeant Rock. Um, but again, you're also then dealing with again the corporate structure.
Mm.
You want to use a character. They'll approach you for a pitch. You deliver a really good pitch. And I don't know if you ever want me to come on, but I'm going to start doing a series. I think tomorrow night we're going to start it with the greatest comics you never thought you'd read. So I have a pitch that was for that I'm going to talk about for the Human Torch, which I love. And I think they're bringing Jim Hammond back, actually. I
Oh.
think Jim Hammond's returning. Marvel's bringing him back. And they approached me to do a story, a one shot for the 70th anniversary. And I thought it was really cool. Everyone seemed to like it until it got to the top, and someone at the top said no. And then they end up doing they end up doing a story of it. I don't want to knock anyone, but it had a lot of the same elements that my story had that was
Hmm.
there for weeks that I was working on. Okay, let's break this down. And you give them a pitch, then you write it as a complete story breakdown. You send it to them. What do you think? This is what happens in pages. Pages 1 through 6. Six. It was maybe 48 pages or so. It was a pretty big story. It wasn't like a 24-page story.
Right.
Um, and so that gets a little frustrating. But same thing, Sergeant Rock. I had a story. I had one called Sergeant Rock War No More, which I felt was the destroyal monsters of of war comics that involved every DC war comic character. And just for one reason or another, they're not really interested in doing war books over there anyway.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that the people that were in place at the time just didn't care about them.
Mm.
They didn't care.
Right.
Harley Quinn was hot. Um, let's focus on that. Or do you have anything else? You want to do this? Like I said, my Batman story, I got nominated for an Eisner Award for it, for best single issue or best short story. Um, but getting to work with, most of the stuff I did for them, I wrote and illustrated.
Yeah.
But it was a real joy to work with Mark Andrico on Birds of Prey. because he's great, and Jimmy Palmiotti, Jimmy, and Justin Gray and Amanda Connor with Harley Quinn and Jonah Hex, and that's fun because it's easier then,
Yeah,
like it's like
good
wow, okay, I
crew.
got a script. This is great. I get to start, you know. So
Yeah.
and they're all great people to work with because like what I know you have 6 panels for this page, but I think I could do it in 4, and if I could make this, and they're like, yeah, sure, do it. So.
Just an easy working relationship.
Yeah, yeah. And then I just, really with COVID happening or just with Kickstarters and Indiegogos, I'm like, I was really missing She. And that's when I felt to take She to the next step. And dude, this has been planned for like 6 years, or 5 years before it came out. I wanted to age She. I wanted to have Anna Ishikawa the next time you see her in the Return of the Warrior. She's actually a single mother raising her teenage daughter in Brooklyn, New York, and her warrior days are far behind her. And then guess what? It all comes back
That's when she thought she was out.
when she thought she was out. Yep. So,
Um, so before we get to that, because I want to talk about your experience with crowdfunding, because it seems to be, catching on and it's kind of the way of the world now, which is great in some ways and maybe challenging in others. But just quickly, you mentioned already Sergeant Rock. Um, was that even though you had these constraints and probably, didn't get to do as much as you wanted to, you mentioned early on how much you were a fan of like war comics. Was
yes.
that like a big, sort of wish fulfillment for you to be able to do some of the, what a classic war comic character?
It was a dream come true. And the thing what we did with that is what's so special to me about the Lost Battalion. And these guys did and forgive me if I look it up. They did a review on it, on their favorite war comics,
Hmm.
and the Lost Battalion, one of my stories, was a big part of it. And what was so special about doing Sergeant Rock, the Lost Battalion, was that I was actually able to work with all these World War II heroes, and it was based on a real battle, and these guys were the veterans of that battle.
Very
And
cool.
it was what a journey it was. I was able to work with the Nisei, the Japanese American soldiers. I was who was Rock and Easy Company are part of the Lost Battalion, and they're trapped behind German lines, and they're surrounded by 7,000 German soldiers. It's like 275 men. Um, and I befriended Erwin Blonder, who was a lieutenant, an artillery observer lieutenant who was attached to the Lost Battalion. So he's in it. I became friends with the Nisei, the Japanese American 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the actual soldiers that were charged with rescuing them, to
Mm.
breaking through to them after all the other units failed. And then I became friends with Arch Archilla, who was one of the pilots, a P-47 pilot who led the mission to try to resupply them, and actually did resupply them, so they can keep fighting. And it's almost like a documentary, the book, but I was able to lay Sergeant Rock and the Easy Company guys into this real life situation, real life battle. Um, and I got to tell you, it's one of the most, if not the most rewarding um, uh, assignment of my life, if you will. It really was getting to befriend them and having them in the comic.
Yeah.
Um, and to have their likenesses in the comic and their actual names, and these are the characters, and the families loved it. And it was just it was an honor to do it. It really was.
Yeah. And you brought a lot of research and sort of passion into it, and it goes back to what you were saying about She when I was asking about what's appealing about her and the story and enduring, is that it seems like authenticity
Yep.
is a major part of that. Is like, let's strip away the BS and just present something authentic, and it'll find its audience, and it'll be
Yeah.
a true story, in some way, even if it's not an actual necessarily true story.
Yeah. And
um
yeah.
Go ahead.
Nope. 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 I agree. I agree. I'm a research fanatic. So
Yes. I,
because I
I
love
love
that.
I
Like
love when things are well researched. It comes
I'm
through on
like,
the page.
yeah, yeah. When we get off, I'm gonna watch Oppenheimer. And I don't want to watch, I want to watch Oppenheimer because I love the subject matter, but
Yeah.
I uh I didn't go see it or watch it initially because at the end of the film they're all waving American flags at him, and it's like 1948 or something, and they're waving 50 star flags. When in 1948 we had 48 star flags, and like
Right.
little things like that drive me fucking crazy. Sorry, can I curse? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of when Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, took
Mhm.
issue with Titanic. Like at one point, I guess the camera pans up at the night sky, and he's like, "That star field is incorrect for the day and time that it was supposed to happen." Like
Yeah, well,
he'd be the only one that would notice that, but still.
it drives you nuts. Like there's little things like in that movie Pearl Harbor, um, the Michael Bay film, that you see the P-40s land, says Mitchell Field, Long Island, and they're landing and there's a giant mountain behind them. So they're filming in L.A. at Santa Monica Airport with the mountains. There's no mountains on Long Island. In the Green Berets, at the end of the film, the Green Berets John Wayne film, he's on the beach, right, walking with the little kid, and you see the sun setting. In Vietnam, the sunset is not on the beach. The sun rises on the beach because it's facing east.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
things like that drive me nuts.
yeah.
So, but I dig.
Dramatic license, I guess
Yeah,
they call
yeah, yeah.
it.
Medals drive me crazy when I see medals are off on uniforms.
Right.
Hatches drive me crazy. Like you see a lot of movies like, um, like The Longest Day or a lot of movies, and they'll have like say the 101st Airborne patch, right? And
Uh-huh.
you see the rocker for the airborne, or some movies don't even have it. They just have the Screaming Eagle patch. It's a two-part patch. I may even have one here. Let me see. But they have it like separated, like
Yeah.
by and no, the rocker should be attached to the patch, like that. Um, that drives me crazy. Little things like in art when they do, but I get nuts though like that because of the Lost Battalion and how much research I did when I see things like in um uh the what was it, what movie, or just say art, whatever, like they'll show the wrong type of helmet netting. Like Band of Brothers got a lot right. They got a few
Hmm.
things wrong, but they got a lot right. um a lot. The nitpicking things is fine because a lot of people didn't even know that then. But like the 101st Airborne, when they jumped in Normandy, they had 1 inch helmet netting, right? If I
Right.
see them with half-inch helmet netting, it drives me crazy. Now I'm sure no one knows what the hell I'm talking about, but the 82nd Airborne wore half-inch helmet netting in Normandy. The 101st Airborne didn't. They were 1 inch. So that means that the netting of the helmet,
Right.
like, this is stuff that drives me crazy. And my wife's like, shut up. I'm like, what odd, like,
Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, it's a respect thing, right? I mean, these are when you're talking about these military and war stories, these are, people that lay down their lives, and you want to get the details right, out of
I want to get
respect
the
for them.
details right.
Um, all right, let's turn back to she and crowdfunding because yeah, as we said, that Kickstarter and Indiegogo are the sort of, the new wave. This is how you do comics. This is how you break into comics. This is how you like bring back things. This is how you get a lot of, for some people who have not had creative control, you have a lot of creative control. But then again, there's also, it's a big hustle,
Yeah.
trying to get your projects out there. It's a crowded field. What are your thoughts on these methods and doing comics in the world of crowdfunding?
I love it. I think there's a new golden age of creator-owned books.
Mhm.
That these people that have never made comics before are able to make careers out of it now. Because there's never been an easier time to get your books out there. When she came out, I was beholden, to a retailer liking it,
Mhm.
or a fan seeing it in previews and requesting it, or the distributor actually allowing the book in, the publisher in. They still gatekeep, and a lot of publishers can't get in because it's business, because they're untested or untried. But with crowdfunding, Mike, I got to tell you, it is. I've met some of the greatest people that have their dreams. My friend Phil Russert's killing it with his tragedy stories.
Yep.
Mandy Summers came out with Gem Shock and um, Jack the Ripper, Vampire Hunter, and Wart the Wizard. There's a lot of people that you've never heard of before that are now they're literally paying their bills and making a living by doing a crowdfunding campaign or two a year. And I love it. I think again, you have Instagram, you have YouTube, you have TikTok if you want to give the Chi-Com some money. I don't. Facebook, Twitter, all these, the internet, Reddit, all these avenues for you to get exposure for free and get your art out there, get your story out there. Um, it's an incredible, incredible time. It's a lot of work.
Yep.
It's a lot of work packing 3,000 books or 3,000 backers, 2,000 backers, 1,500 backers, and they all want different things.
Right.
It's getting the right printing paper, getting printers to do it because of how the economy is. Many of the printers that actually doing crowdfunded books also do yearbooks. So you have to schedule yourself that you don't get pushed back because you got to get it in because the yearbooks are there's big money in yearbooks. Jostens is comes to mind. Um, so it's it's a it's a it's an amazing, again, as I said, avenue to get your creative work out there. And I know I'm rambling, and forgive me, but crowdfunding has reinvigorated my love of comics. And I know you've asked like 3 questions, and I've just talked the whole
Oh
time.
no, we've got
I'm
got through a
sorry,
lot.
but I love it. I love it, and as long as it keeps going, let's keep doing it.
Great. So with that in mind, and you already told us a little bit about it, what are you working on now, or just reiterate what you're working on now? I know it's the new She book, but and what fans can look forward to in sort of the immediate future.
Yep. Well, right now we have a campaign on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. It's the Rocketeer Pavlichenko art edition. And
Yep.
what that is, it takes my Rocketeer story that was in the Comics for Ukraine Sunflower Seeds
Hmm.
charity book. What that book is, it's not a political book at all. It's a book to benefit the refugees of the war. It just goes to civilians that have been displaced by the Russian invasion of it. But I was talking to Jennifer Stevens Backham, who is Dave's sister, working with the Rocketeer Trust. And I've got all this great stuff for this book. And, it won the Eisner Award for best anthology. I've got the script, I've got the pencils, I've got roughs, I've got the inks, I've got the colors. And let's put together a cool little art book about this.
Hmm.
And let people know who Ludmila Pavlichenko was. She was the top female sniper in world history. She killed 309 fascist soldiers from, yes, June of 2021 to, June of 1941 to February of 1942. So in a 6-7 month period, she killed over 300 enemy soldiers. And I have her saving the Rocketeers on a special mission,
Right.
and she has to bail him out. And it's a cool story, but we're also going to take a portion of the proceeds and donate them to the Harrisville Leukemia Foundation in Dave Stevens's name, because that sadly is what took Dave from us in 2008. And it's just something, if we could do a book, get it out there, and maybe do some good. It's a project I'm really proud of. And that is right now live on Kickstarter. It's only a 20-day campaign. We have 8 days left to it. We're already at $15,000 with that. And it's also on Indiegogo as well. If you just Google it, you just search it, you'll find it.
Right.
The Rocketeer Pavlichenko art edition on Indiegogo is part of our She's Second Coming campaign. But I think if you just Google it, it'll pop up.
Nice.
Or go to my page and I can share the link and stuff like that. And
The other,
then, yep,
go ahead.
that book's done. I just have to, we're gonna, we just have some like interviews to do, and then that book goes to press in next month. Well, September, which is almost next month. I mean, October, which is almost next month. We fulfill that book in November, and then next month we launch She Gatecrasher on both Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaign. They're two exclusives, so there's exclusive things to one and the other campaign to make them
Got it.
different. Uh, And that's, like I said, that's the destroy all zombies of public domain and comic book genre books. And it's a true love letter to the history of comics. And it's a lot of fun. It's all action, dude. It's just all action from the start. And there might even be a mouse that debuted in 1928 that he just might be in it too, with his girlfriend, whose name shall
He
not be, who shall remain nameless.
All right, everybody. What did you think of that interview? I loved talking to Billy, big personality. Loved hearing all the stories about the origins of his, getting into the industry, as well as, the phenomenon that was she and that is she. So definitely encourage you to pick up the new She book, She Gatecrasher, which should be on Kickstarter very soon. You should also pick up a project that is still on Indiegogo and maybe late pledges for Kickstarter called Rocketeer Pavlichenko. So that's taking Dave Stevens' creation and Billy's contribution to Comics for Ukraine and kind of blowing it out into a bigger and better package. And so check it out, Indiegogo and Kickstarter. We'll put it in the notes. Part of the proceeds will be donated to the Hairy Cell Leukemia Foundation. That is, obviously the disease that took Dave, as Billy told us. And so it would be wonderful to give that charity some funding. But that will do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for rating, reviewing, subscribing, doing all the great stuff to help support the Dollar Bin Bandits. We'll be back on Friday, and we'll see you then.